Hello to all my friends at all of my issues. It's me, Mario. Woohoo! Mamma mia! You guys, you number one. Woohoo! Oh yeah, number one. Ho ho! Wait to say it, bro. Here we go. Woohoo!
Hello, Internet, and welcome to another episode of All of My Issues. In this episode, episode 16, we talked to comic book artist Ron Frenz, but this is actually part 2 of episode 16. So if you didn't listen to part 1, stop right now and go back and listen to part 1. But before we get into part 2 of episode 16, let's talk about Geek Fuel. If you're anything like us, and let's face it, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably are, you enjoy geeky things. And one of the best ways to get your monthly geek on is to subscribe to
Geek Fuel. It's the best.
Yeah, Geek Fuel will send you a box monthly filled with comic book, gaming, sci-fi, and pop culture related material. Right now, if you go to our website, allofmyissues.com, and click the Geek Fuel link, you can save $3 off of your Geek Fuel subscription. You can use those $3 to buy Ron Frenz's new project that he's working on with Darren Henry called The Blue Baron. So enjoy.
Anyway, next question.
All right. Yeah, we were talking a little bit about Thor. Do you want to talk a little bit about New Warriors? They kind of spawned off of Thor, right?
Yeah, it did. It was something DeFalco wanted to do. We played with a couple of different ideas and a couple of different characters over a period of time before he settled on Night Thrasher. But yeah, because Night Thrasher was the only original character, right? Yeah, because it was Speedball and Namorita and
Firestar
and Vance Astra.
Oh yeah.
Where the original what was he calling it? The Marvel Boy.
Marvel Boy. That's it. Yeah.
So it was fun. I mean, I designed Night Thrasher, and that was during that period in the '90s. It was just so crazy because at one point I was actually getting, because the sales were so solid, I was actually getting creator incentive checks for New Warriors, Silver Sable, a Night Thrasher solo miniseries, and
which I have.
There might have been even something else in there too. It was a crazy time, it really was. But it was a lot of fun. Namorita, I had a crush on Namorita since Bill Everett created her back in Submariner number 50 or 51 or something like that. So it was fun doing that. And Firestar, coming from the cartoon, Tom was kind of the guy that was responsible for bringing her into the Marvel Universe. And, and again, even at that point, that was Tom trying to create some titles that would appeal to teenagers. And to this day, he's trying to create things that would hopefully appeal to that kind of missing demographic. When we did that Thunderstrike mini, we decided to make Kevin more of a rebellious kid who didn't embrace his dad's superhero past and try to create a character arc that would resonate with younger people, hopefully, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, New Warriors was very much an attempt to do that. And the hints he threw out for Night Thrasher and the supporting characters he set up and all that. He wrote a Bible for that character that became the Bible for the New Warriors that Fabian Nicieza started with when he wrote the solo book. And not that I'm trying to suggest in any way that Mark Bagley owes me his career, because he's a really talented guy and a terrific guy. And I love his stuff, I really do. But he was just starting out. He had just done a couple of annuals. In fact, I think he worked on one of the annuals I did a cover for that introduced Speedball. And at the time, I'm trying to remember who the editor was, because it was somebody I had worked with before. It might have been Danny Fingerroth, but I'm not positive. Don't quote me on that. But it was an editor that I was very familiar with, and I'm pretty sure it was Danny. And I was really pushing for him to hire Mark Bagley on New Warriors, because he was. Dan is famously uncertain until he makes a decision. Ask everybody for an opinion before he finally makes his final decision, which in a lot of ways makes him a very good editor, although sometimes it gets a little you get a little impatient waiting for the decision, but once the decision comes down, it's always a solid one. But yeah, I remember having a conversation with him about New Warriors just because we had introduced him in Thor and everything, and I said, you can't go wrong with this Bagley kid. So I mean and boy, he did some nice work on that. So yeah, I mean it was a lot of fun. We tried. Tom wanted to use the skateboard a lot, and I wasn't really sure about that, so we did use it in the couple of first issues because his whole name is based on the whole skateboard thing.
Yeah.
But I also just, really a skateboard? Okay, and you try to make it as cool as you can. And
when they can make Rocket Raccoon like a viable character in a movie, why not Night Thrasher, right?
Yeah. I mean, well, that's really if you just sell it.
Yeah.
So that's really all it takes, because every character is somebody's favorite character.
Yeah.
I mean, and quite frankly, that was one of those things where because one of the characters we had discussed was based on boxing at the time. It was going to be a young character that was based in boxing, but he realized, he looked around and he saw that was when Thrasher magazine first came out.
Mm-hmm.
Skateboarding was huge.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So that was Tom, taking some, paying attention to what was going on in the marketplace and deciding, maybe we can capitalize on that to some degree. And that's how that's why he decided to go with the skateboarding and stuff. So he thought we shouldn't run from the skateboarding, and he was probably right. He usually is. Irritatingly, he is usually right. But and that's kind of something they lost when they did the New Warriors. I mean, because at one point I think they were even pretty much dropping the Knight and just going with Thrasher, and yet he didn't really use the skateboard much at all. So they just meant Thrasher when it came to like beating the crap out of bad guys, I guess, or something.
Yeah. Well,
thrashing bad guys.
Yeah. Well, for me, I was a huge New Warriors fan, and it was like refreshing to see as an African American Night Thrasher being the leader when there was like few and far between. Because you had Black Panther and Falcon and Black Lightning, like they were always like the sidekick or never really the leader of the team, even though Black Panther was the leader of a nation.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Wakanda, come on.
Yeah. I mean, I understand that, but
Guess Wakanda.
when people look at comics when he's on the Avengers, it's like, oh well, he's with Captain America. But it was like nice to see, Night Thrasher was like, hey, I don't really have any powers, but I'm telling you guys, go over here, Speedball, go over here. And
yeah. I mean, I enjoyed the character quite a bit, and you bring up an interesting point, because the way they're retooling some of the characters to be more diversified and everything. A lot of longtime fans have a real hard time with that, and it doesn't bother me as much as it does some people. Really, I mean, when we were working on the books, we would try to make the rest of the cast as inclusive as possible, and it was funny because I never knew for sure whether or not it mattered. I mean, it was always worth doing for our own sake to represent New York City.
Yeah.
Because New York City is just, oh my God.
Yeah.
You don't look out at lunchtime and see a street full of white guys. That's for damn sure.
Right.
So, we always tried to do that with the supporting cast, with Code Blue, with all this kind of stuff. And occasionally, I would find myself in a mindset where, somebody would be talking about inclusiveness and somebody would be talking about, that kind of, the word fell out of my head. I just used it before. Diversity.
Yeah.
And I would, kind of wake up in a cold sweat and go, are we being diverse enough in Thor? And then I would, going, we really need to do more diverse characters. And then I realized, well, we got Marcus Stone and we got Riga Ruiz and we got Samantha Joyce as his lawyer. And so we're doing what we can.
Right.
You still got that Lily White lead, and you're kind of like, that kind of thing. So it is. It's if you have an antenna up, it's certainly something that you're aware of. And for me, it was always as much realistically representing New York as it was anything else.
Right.
I mean, if you're doing a story that's set in the middle of Ohio, then maybe you can
it's got to be a little different.
Hey,
you got Sikhs in the background with turbans on, and you got the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's something that I always tried to reflect, and I'm glad. I'm glad you had a positive response to Night Thrasher and everything, because I am nothing if not a middle-aged white guy. The character I'm working on now, Blue Baron, the lead character is Ernie Rodriguez.
Okay.
And I'm thrilled. And his dad has brown skin and his mom doesn't, and we certainly, I don't believe that you have to go apeshit with that kind of stuff. But I also do believe that, for every longtime fan that gets pissed off about it, there are hundreds of thousands of people that might give it a shot because now they can relate to that character.
Absolutely, yeah.
The people that went apeshit about the female Thor, that didn't bother me at all. I think probably Tom and I would have created a whole new character, and because Thor is kind of his name.
That's so funny because we've had that same conversation. Like,
not a female Captain America, you have a female Steve.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
That kind of thing. So I'm sure that if Tom and I would have gone that direction, we would have come up with a new name,
like Thorette or something. I don't know.
But that was always Tom's thing to begin with. I mean, when we were doing MC2, and I wanted to do a female Falcon, he said, I love the idea, but we're not going to call it Falcon. I said, really? And he goes, no, come up with something else. And I came up with Lady Hawk from the old medieval movie.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
And he went, that's fine, that's great. Just but we're not just going to do a bunch of characters with the same name, because those names are already spoken for, and we're trying to create something that, ultimately, you're hoping to create the next big thing that could be marketed as action figures and get its own cartoon show and all this kind of stuff. So why would you want it to be so derivative that it's the same name? That kind of thing. So Tom's always thinking that. Tom always approaches every project like it could potentially be the next Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle.
That's probably a good way to approach it.
Yeah,
smart.
Yeah, because you you're all into it.
Yeah, you're all in, and if it takes off, you're on a rocket ride. How great is that?
Yeah.
Because even when he was developing Spider-Girl, when he in his head, and he told me Spider-Girl, and I kind of went, Spider-Girl? Yeah, okay. What can't we just call her Spider-Woman? Because, he was a kid when he became Spider-Man, and, all that kind of stuff. And he goes, yeah, but Spider-Woman has the stink of death on it. And at that point, there had already been like 3 Spider-Women.
Mm-hmm.
Except none of them were currently being published. And he said, so, why be another Spider-Woman? And he was right. He was absolutely right about that. Of course, now she's back to being a Spider-Woman because less creative people are now in charge of such things. And I will go on record and say that the people that made that decision are less creative than Mr. Tom DeFalco. That I will say. And I will stand by that.
So you've had like quite the career. Is there like one specific piece or one single thing that you've worked on that like you're most proud of? or is it just like every new thing that you work on is like that's your new baby, and that's the
that's absolutely true. I mean, I would say that absolutely characterizes any kind of creative endeavor. When you're lucky enough to be part of a succession of creative endeavors, you have to kind of fall in love with the next project and stuff. But there are things that stand out. I mean, the kid who collects Spider-Man is a big one.
Yeah, we were talking about that. Yeah.
That was one of those things. It was during the transition between Tom DeFalco and Danny Fingeroth. And Tom was going to give me that story, but he wasn't sure that Danny was. He says, but it's up to Danny now. So let's wait and see what Danny wants to do. And I had already been a huge Roger Stern fan and had met Roger and liked him personally and everything, and knew what a genius he was. And I kind of lucked out on it. I can look back on that job now, and it doesn't make me want to vomit or anything. And Austin did a terrific job on it. And, everything came together on that. I can actually look back on something from that long ago and feel like I did a pretty good job of serving his story, and that's the most important thing when you're a penciler. So the content of the story, the emotional weight of the story and everything, I just thought everything kind of came together on that one. And
yeah, definitely.
So that one I can still look back on with a lot of pride. And A-Next, Thunderstrike, the entire run of Thunderstrike I was very proud of. I would stand by that character. He takes his share of knocks, but the one of the things that helps me with kind of choosing the things that I can be proud of is because to this day I will get people at conventions who will come up to me and talk about the fact that Thunderstrike was their favorite character.
That's awesome.
And as I pointed out before, I mean, everybody is somebody's favorite character.
Yeah.
But it's really nice when people come up and will volunteer that information to you, because it really does matter. It really does feel good that you entertained that many people. But it also, to me, is another indication of, as I mentioned in passing, it was that whole Perlman thing. Perlman's people came in, and they had a big meeting where his people were part of the meeting, and all the Marvel people were there, and DeFalco was there. And one of Perlman's people stood up and said, here's their plan for Marvel, which is we're going to cancel half the titles, we're going to cancel half the line, because the half that's left will sell twice as well.
Wow.
I'm going to grab that sentence and think about it for a second. Tom laughed. And he said, right then I knew I was marked for death. He said, right then I knew I had, when I laughed out loud, I knew that I wasn't going to be long for the editor-in-chief position, and he was right. But he said, this isn't cans of baked beans, guys. These are all very individual. If you cancel somebody's favorite title, they don't just turn to the left and pick the next title.
Yeah.
I mean, these are individual product. They're not all the same product.
Yeah.
So if a kid has, money in his pocket and he's got it earmarked for a comic book and a slice of pizza, his favorite comic book, a slice of pizza and a Coke, he's not going to go in, and if his favorite comic book's not there, he's going to get 2 slices of pizza. He's not going to just pick another character. So that's not going to work. And he was right then branded as somebody who wasn't going to cooperate with this ridiculous idea. But Thunderstrike and War Machine and a lot of the spin-off characters were the first ones to be canceled under that ridiculous thinking. Wow. Thunderstrike was selling terrific. It was doing fine. It was in no danger of being canceled. I mean, at one point, around that time, Ralph Macchio offered me Captain America. And I've always wanted to do Captain America. I've wanted to do it with Tom DeFalco, but I've always wanted to work on Captain America. But I was happy on Thunderstrike. We were doing great on Thunderstrike. And at the time, and Ralph really wasn't comfortable with me trying to do 2 books a month. And because he had his share of issues with with me on Thor, mostly during, if you remember, and a lot of people don't remember this, several years when we were on Thor, we did bi-weeklies over the summer.
I do remember that.
Yeah, we would go to twice a month. And I see, on blogs and stuff now, I'll see people, talking about how there were fill-ins on Spider-Man and, Frenz can't hit a monthly schedule. And with all due respect, I can hit a monthly schedule. I've been doing this for 30 years, and I think, 7 years on Thor kind of proves that. Now, Ralph, we were tight a few times, and I'm not going to try to say that, especially during the bi-weeklies. But, Ralph was not comfortable with me trying to do 2 books. He said, if you want to stay with Thunderstrike, I respect that. That's great. But, if you're interested in doing Captain America, I'd rather just have you on Captain America. And I said, well, let me ask you this, Ralph. Between you, me, and the lamppost, is there any reason that I should go to Captain America? I mean, is Thunderstrike okay? He goes, Thunderstrike's doing great. There's no danger of Thunderstrike. And Ralph was being completely honest with me at that moment. The fact that a couple of months later Thunderstrike got canceled was not Ralph Macchio's fault. It was Ron Perlman's people. My editor had just told me Thunderstrike is as safe as any comic book could be. The sales are terrific. But, the next thing we knew, it was gone.
That is absolutely crazy.
It sucks.
That is, yeah.
I mean, a lot of people were out of work because of that. A lot of books got canceled that were doing just fine. So, but the proof of that for me is the fact that all these years later, I'm still meeting people who were huge Thunderstrike fans. We were reaching a lot of fans who were enjoying what we were doing, and they were all wondering, why the hell was that book canceled? What are you going to do? And A-Next was another thing that, it was doing okay. It was part of the whole original first plan for MC2 was this tiered thing where you would do, DeFalco had this vision of doing, 12 issues of a book and then starting another title. And because originally MC2 was supposed to be marketed, you remember the old 3-packs of comics in plastic bags?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was the original plan. That's why originally it was A-Next, Spider-Girl, and J2. They were supposed to be packaged as part of a deal with, one of those big box stores type of thing, like Walmart's and Sam's Clubs and all this kind of stuff. They were supposed to be packaged as 3-packs in books, which is why they were this whole idea of a next generation of superheroes that kids could read and kind of join in and kind of go, oh, okay, this is fun. This is me. This is talking to me and blah, blah, blah. The problem was nobody in Marvel sales ever closed the deal.
Oh, man.
These books were never supposed to be on the regular racks in comic book retail stores. They were supposed to be mass market, to an entire new audience of, hopefully younger readers. And, so none of them were really designed to survive in that current marketplace. And yet Spider-Girl went 14 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was one of those unfortunate things where, the whole reason for those books existing never came to pass because somebody dropped the ball in marketing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So,
crazy.
I've had my share of frustrations like that, no doubt about it.
Yeah. Let me think here.
Other question?
That's what I'm trying to think of now. I'm not during that time frame. That was pretty much, was that when Marvel was having a lot of their bankruptcy?
Yeah.
That's
It
okay.
was shortly after that all the bankruptcy started happening and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I was under contract for the end of the Thor run, and for Thunderstrike, I was under contract with Marvel. And Mark Grunwald was in hell during that period of time because with Perlman's people in charge, they had something called I don't know, different people have called it Black Thursday. A couple of people called it Bloody Thursday, where just a shit ton of people in the office were being canned and stuff. It was just ugly all around. And what ended up happening was Mark was dealing with this with a lot of people, but since I was under contract, he was looking for other work for me and was just unable to find anything. From what I understand, after he passed, his wife was looking at his journal, and just way too many entries were starting with, I had to fire so-and-so today. I was offered, Mike Carlin had gotten wind of what was going on and had offered me a gig, the Superman gig. And I talked to Mark. I said, Mark, as far as I'm concerned, I'm a Marvel guy. If anybody at Marvel wants to work with me,
right? Yeah.
And Mark really, I have no doubt that Mark really tried, and it just didn't come together. So I ended up terminating my contract and taking the Superman gig for a couple of years until the MC2 stuff came up. So I was very fortunate to have a high-profile port in the storm, that kind of thing. Because Carlin was somebody that I had been friendly with in the past, and Brett Breeding, of course, was over there working on the Superman books and and all that kind of stuff. So I think he had been talking me up to some degree and everything. So it ended up working out. And I got to spend 2 years over on Superman, getting paid really good money. It was a tough gig, though, because all the books were so interlocking that, you had no time to think.
Yeah.
You had a plot, and you needed to really start producing because they were sending out weekly packages to all the different freelancers so we could see what everybody else was doing, because if you designed a character, everybody had to see it so they could pick up the next story thread, and on and on and on. And it became very crazy that way. I that part of it, the pressure of it, I did not enjoy. I quite frankly don't think it's my best work because you really just had to, I'm used to a monthly schedule, but you had to boom, 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 boom. It was just amazing.
Wow. Yeah.
Really tough. But they paid for the privilege because it was good money. It's good money. So and I wasn't even there during the really, the big Death of heyday. I was there for the wedding, but that was the only big event I was really there for. Oh, and the Superman Blue stuff, if you consider that an event.
Yeah.
They actually picked my design, and I got to do, TV interviews. And that piece of art of Superman standing there in the electric blue thing is probably the most reprinted piece of artwork I've ever had. It was in TV Guide, it was in Time Magazine, it was in Newsweek, it was all over the place, in newspapers all over the country, because DC went, they went crazy alerting the media like this was they tried to make it as big a deal as they could, and people bet because redesigning Superman, that would be huge.
Yeah, definitely.
And we were all under threat of our jobs. To anybody asks, this is permanent. This is Superman now. Yeah. And that's what a few of us would do when asked that direct question. Is this permanent? We would go, this is Superman now. Oh, I'm just saying. That's crazy. But it was fun. It's all been a lot of fun. When the time comes and I wrap it up, Star Trek Generations is by no means my favorite movie, but it's famous. Is it Generations that has the death of Captain Kirk in it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was so perfect, his last line there, when he says, it's been fun. And it just spoke so much to Shatner and that character, and I just thought it was beautiful. And I have been an incredibly lucky guy. When I do talks at schools, at schools for kids and stuff, I always tell the kids, your dad might think he's the luckiest guy in the world, but you can go home today and you can tell him, no, Dad, I met the luckiest guy in the world. How many kids get to do the thing that they dream of doing in a field as relatively exclusive as comics. I mean,
Yeah.
It's a friend of mine did some math in his head at one point, and he said, comics is about as exclusive as the NBA. It's like a kid growing up wanting to play in the NBA and actually accomplishing it.
I totally believe that.
I had never really
Yeah.
thought of it like that before, other than to know that I was very fortunate. That I worked hard and I was very directed from a very young age, and that's what I wanted to do, and I was pretty single-minded about it. But the fact that I accomplished it, and the fact that I've had a 30-some-year career so far in this thing, is just it's an amazing gift, and I don't take that for granted. I know you're all crying and sniffling. Ask another question.
I do have a question. I'm going to take it the opposite way, but oftentimes they say that you should never, meet your heroes. What opposite examples of that do you have of people that you've worked with that just exceeded your expectations and how awesome it is, other than the legendary Tom DeFalco?
Well, and again, as I mentioned before, I had no expectations meeting Tom, because when I first heard him taking over Spider-Man, who the hell is this kid? That's another thing I've been incredibly fortunate about. John Romita is one of the nicest guys you're ever going to meet. His wife, Virginia, is terrific. And I got to know them well enough around different conventions and stuff that at one point, there was some comment made about, no, I really only going to do that with my son. I asked John about inking me. And I was fortunate enough to work with him once or twice. But he said, no, I promised my son that if I'm going to ink anybody, it would be him. And I said, but John, I could be your son. And Virginia was standing there, and she goes, Ron, we have enough assholes in the family. So, I'm standing there kidding around with John Romita Sr. for Frenz. So that was terrific. I never got to shake hands and actually talk to Jack Kirby. I did see him at a convention live and all that kind of stuff. I got to meet and shake hands with Steve Ditko one time.
Oh, nice.
And everybody was like, what's he look like? It was in the Marvel offices. I was working with Joe Duffy. I had worked with Joe Duffy on Star Wars, so we were friends. And I was hanging out in the Epic offices with her and Archie Goodwin, if I'm dropping names. And also an incredibly nice man. My God, did we lose? We just lost the best when we lost Archie and Mark Grunwald. But I was in the office hanging out with Joe Duffy and Archie Goodwin, and Steve Ditko was doing a backup for Coyote or something like that. It was it called the Gin or something? I forget. I don't know if any of you guys were into the Epic comics. But he was doing a backup for them, and he walked in, and Archie said, Ron, this is Steve Ditko. And I went, oh my God. I said to him, Mr. Ditko, it's a pleasure to meet you. And he goes, it's the same year. And it was very innocuous and everything. And then Archie goes, he's on Spider-Man now. And Steve went, oh, good for you. And then Steve goes, they're making him do you. And went, shame on them. And I went, well, they're not making me, sir. But I remember, coming home and telling people, oh, and I got to meet Steve Ditko. What's he look like? He created such an air of mystery around himself and everything. But he's a very nice man. And who else? John Buscema, who can be, at the time he was famous for sitting at conventions and kind of being a curmudgeon and being a little contrary. I got to meet him in DeFalco's office one time. I'm not sure, but I think when I shook his hand, Tom DeFalco said, this is Ron Frenz. And I shook John Buscema's hand, and I think under his breath, he went, oh, very, very good. But I'm not sure. Falco says that's what he said. He might have said, asshole. But I had no illusions that he was familiar with my work or anything like that. But it was at the time he was doing The Punisher, because he comes into the office and he was dealing with a younger editor. And he said to Tom, he said, "Am I going to get what I need from this kid, Tom? Am I going to get my scripts on time and everything?" And he goes, "We'll take care of you, John. Don't worry about it." And it hadn't been announced yet. And I said, "Excuse me, sir, for asking, but what are you working on out of that office?" Because I knew what books that editor was doing. Don Daly, I believe, was the editor. There's no reason I'm not giving his name. I don't know why I did that. But I said, "What are you doing for Don Daly?" And he went, "Oh, God, what's his name? DeFalco, what's the name of the guy with the blue shirt?" And I knew what Don Daly was editing, and I went, "The Punisher?" And he went, yeah, The Punisher. So John Buscema, The Punisher, was the guy in the blue shirt. So that was amazing. And he sat and chatted with DeFalco for a while, and I was welcome to sit there and partake. And of course, becoming co-workers and friends with Sal Buscema has just been an amazing thing. Sal's the nicest guy you're going to meet. So I can honestly say that of the guys that we originally talked about who were my influences and that I've been lucky enough to meet, I have been far from disappointed. In fact, they've been more than I ever could have wished for, as far as an experience meeting them, and certainly becoming friends with Sal and being accepted as an equal by some of these guys. To this day, it just blows my mind. I'll pull out my old issues of the Avengers or my Avengers Essential, and I'll be flipping through, Sal's run on the early run on the Avengers, inked by Sam Granger, and it's so bizarre to think, oh, that's the guy. I could pick up the phone and call him right now if I feel like it. I'm still that fanboy too, and it's an incredible thing to not be disappointed by your idols. I've heard of other guys who have met their idols and been a little disappointed, and I feel for them. I really do. But I've been very, very fortunate when it comes to that. So even people ask me about Jim Shooter, and Shooter, you get a different opinion from everybody that interacted with him, depending on what that interaction was. And that I find that happens a lot with editors in chief. Anybody that's in a position of authority is subject to those kinds of opinions and perceptions from people, because a lot of people find it very difficult to have any kind of a real reaction with somebody who is their boss, who can hire or fire them. Do you ever hear the old story that, you remember when Iron Man had a nose for a while in the 70s?
Vaguely.
Said yes, come on.
Vaguely, that sounds familiar. Yeah.
For some stupid period of time, he had a nose. Do you know how that came about? Stan was looking at pages at one point, looking at Iron Man pages, and he actually said, just more to himself than to anybody else, I wonder what Iron Man would look like with a nose.
That's awesome.
And people in that room walked out and went, Stan says Iron Man has to have a nose now. So they tell poor George Tuska, and they tell the editor, and Iron Man has a nose for a while, right? And Stan is looking at comics months and months later, and he goes, when did Iron Man get a nose?
That's awesome.
But it's that kind of a thing, I can remember somebody telling me that Tom DeFalco was going around telling people that all the comic books, because of what we were doing on Thor and because it was selling, all the comic books had to revert back to what the character was in the 60s.
Huh. Really?
Never said that.
Wow.
Somebody got it in their head. And I'll bet you I know where it came from. I bet you what Tom was talking about was revisiting the character, looking at the character, and looking at what makes that character unique. Okay.
Yeah.
And if you go back to the original Iron Man stories, and if it's about man's relationship with technology and the fact that he was using technology to keep him alive, and I'll bet you he was talking about those kinds of story elements.
Like going back to the roots of the characters.
Exactly.
And stuff. Yeah.
I bet you he was talking about that, and because that, on top of me doing Kirby on Thor, somebody walked out of that meeting and went, Tom is telling everybody, DeFalco's telling everybody we got to do the characters like they were in the 60s. And it's, that's the kind of shit that happens when you're the boss, and it sucks. It sucks. And I never felt that Tom needed to be defended. I mean, Tom would laugh when he was accused of stabbing somebody in the back. He goes, I try not to worry about that kind of stuff. He says, for one thing, I've never stabbed anybody in the back in my life. I like to stab them in the front so I can watch the light go out of their eyes.
That's awesome.
And he always played up that Italian, threatening thing, which he's a big teddy bear. None of that's true. But yeah, I really did see, and Shooter is one of those, he's a very polarizing figure. I know people who would take a bullet for him and loved him. I know people that hated him. I've worked with both. In my opinion, he did a lot of good for this industry. I mean, there's no denying the good he did for this industry, for incentives and royalties, pay rates, all that kind of stuff. I was very fortunate to have worked for Marvel in the 80s when we still had newsstand sales and when we were still a mass market entertainment form. And I learned how to do comics in that environment. And I'm really glad I was able to be here for the last 20 years of that, that kind of thing before it all went to hell. Because those are the comics I grew up on, and that's one of the things I'm very fortunate about. But I also had conversations myself. I witnessed conversations with Jim Shooter that I didn't really agree with, and at one point I even spoke up to him, and I remember hearing again later, people were going, "You said that to Jim Shooter?" And I'm like, I didn't realize we weren't allowed to talk. What does that mean? Because so many people just let these guys. I mean, you need to be called on things, because I'll give you an example. I was in a meeting. It was one of a handful of times that I would go into New York. Back when Marvel had an expense account and stuff, I could go into New York either for Spider-Man summit meetings or for if I was in town for a convention, or if I was, if there was a reason for me, whether it's a Christmas party or something like that. But I would go in for an entire day. I would sometimes sit and help proofread comics. You'd sit there with all 22 boards on your lap and help proofread and all this kind of stuff. I've drawn covers in the office before, I've experienced, the office when it was a bullpen, and it was fun, and I'm glad I had a chance to experience that. But I can remember sitting in some meetings. It was a Spider-Man summit, I think, but Jim Shooter made the assertion. He made two assertions. One was that Spider-Man has never punched anybody in his life.
What?
Wow, that's kind of hard to swallow.
Yeah.
I can show you panels by Steve Ditko of a fist and a chin.
Yeah.
So that was kind of silly, but he was saying that Spider-Man doesn't hit because he's so fast, and with the spider sense, he doesn't have to punch people. And it's like, well, that's kind of retconning a lot of visual stuff,
right?
Yeah.
But okay, if that's how you feel about it, sir, we can kind of keep an eye on that moving forward, But he also he made the assertion that the only I had been witness to him having trouble with a Daredevil script. And I don't remember if I was still on Spider-Man at the time or not, so it would have been sometime in the early to mid-'80s, or mid-'80s, that he had trouble with the Daredevil script because he said to the editor there was no reason for Matt Murdock to put on the Daredevil costume. Now, at that point, Daredevil has been published for 20-some years.
Right.
Yeah.
His costume are his work clothes.
Yeah.
Put on his costume because he's going to swing around the city, or because he doesn't want to, mess up his suit. You know, I mean, so
Yeah.
of course we've already established his identity as Daredevil, so of course there's a reason for him to put on the damn suit. But it was during the period of time where he was working on his concept for the new universe, and he wanted things to be more realistic. And he's like, in this particular story, he didn't feel there was a reason for Matt Murdock to, you know, throw off his outer garment and stand revealed in his Daredevil costume. You know, but then in this meeting, he says about Spider-Man, the only reason Peter Parker puts on a Spider-Man costume and goes out at night is to take pictures of himself for the Daily Bugle.
Oh, man.
And in fairness,
That minimizes that quite a bit.
in fairness to Jim Shooter, that might not be an exact quote. I don't know that for a fact. But, you know, because my memory of it is he made that statement because I kind of raised my hand and I said, no. There's that whole Uncle Ben thing. You know?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. And his point was he was trying to relate it to regular people and our readership. And what he said was that, you know, if you're married to a supermodel, you're going to stay home at night. Dating a supermodel and all this kind of stuff, you know. He says, but if I'm dating Mary Jane, I'm not going out at night unless I'm doing it to make money. And I'm going, but I said, no, but what about, you know, with great power must also come great responsibility. What about Uncle Ben's death and the lesson he learned from that and all this kind of stuff? And he said, Ron, he says, listen, just because I'm almost 7 feet tall or whatever the heck Jim Shooter is, I don't know how tall Jim Shooter is, but just because I'm as tall as I am, I don't altruistically go into Central Park and help them change the light bulbs because I can reach them. Just because I have that ability or that talent, I don't go out and just use it altruistically. And I said, but with all due respect, sir, that's why we're not doing a comic book about you. And you know, and he laughed, and it was fine, you know, that kind of thing. But he said, you know, it just doesn't make any sense to him that you get a superpower and you would act, you know, you would immediately go out for the betterment of man and act altruistically. And I said, but we have plenty of characters that that get superpowers and don't act altruistically. They're called the bad guys.
Yeah.
Electro, all these guys, they got superpowers. They become the villains. We need villains, you know, that kind of thing. So that's the other side of the coin. So, you know, I thought it was a terrific conversation. It was an interesting conversation. But again, you know, because he's the boss, later I got these reactions from people like, you said that to Jim Shooter? And like, yeah, I said that to Jim Shooter. He didn't throw me out a window or anything. I didn't get the impression he was pissed off about it at all, you know, that kind of thing. And I think it was because he was, you know, because he as we pointed out earlier in passing, he was writing the Legion when he was 13, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
And I think he was at the cutting edge, the leading edge of, you know, like Roy Thomas is one of your first, you know, fans turned pros guys, you know, in the late 60s there. He was one of the first guys who was a huge comic book fan that entered the industry as a professional and all this kind of stuff. Jim, all those years later, Mr. Shooter was one of these guys who I think he was on that leading edge of bringing his sensibility to the comics. You know, because what the new universe was supposed to be, you know, superhero stories in the absolute real world, the world outside your window, where if a character breaks through a wall, if it's a load-bearing wall, the house comes down. You know, when the wall is broken, you see piping, you see insulation, you know, that was the indoctrination for the new universe. It was going to be as real can be, given the shocking introduction of whatever the superpower or the conceit of the story was. And I think his brain was going that direction with the superheroes. very much to what it is now. I mean, I'm sure it's probably relatively common now to have an issue of any given superhero where he doesn't suit up in the course of the issue. I have a feeling that's probably not all that unusual these days, Although the one thing I have noticed about comics, Tom DeFalco and I have talked about this, is that superheroes tend to only interact with superheroes anymore. It's almost become more of like a separate fantasy world, like Sword and Sorcery or Lord of the Rings or something, where you don't really get a lot of touching base with what the real world is like in the Marvel Universe, because everything is so affected by S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Avengers and the Inhumans and, Asgard's blocked and all this kind of stuff thing, that even the world, the regular world is completely affected by what's going on in the comic book story. So there is no regular Joe, that the stories are told through his eyes or anything, because everybody is so affected by the stories over the last several years. Entire cities have blown up and, all this kind of stuff. So it's really gotten to a point where it's hard to relate, which is another reason why I think Shooter wanted to go back to a world in the new universe where it was the world we're used to, and then we start introducing the incredible, that kind of thing. Instead of trying to say that people are still amazed when somebody flies overhead in New York of Marvel 616, that kind of thing. Yeah. And I think that's really what he was reaching for. That was the point he was trying to make. And but the simple fact is, these characters are remarkable people, and they should be portrayed as remarkable people. Yes, most of us, if we were dating Mary Jane Watson, would spend as much time at home as humanly possible. Yeah. But Peter Parker is better than we are. Peter Parker learned a hard lesson from the death of Uncle Ben.
Exactly,
so Pete is going out. Pete's doing his job. And Mary Jane's remarkable because she understands that. That's one of the things she loves about him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, there really are people like that in the real world. They're called firemen and policemen and paramedics. And, never lose sight of the fact that a professional fireman runs into a burning building while other people are running out.
Yeah. True.
Well put, these people exist and should be celebrated. And if we can do that through the lens of a superhero, then let's do it. I always loved, when I was a kid reading the Marvel comics, where Stan would always take the time to tell you that the real heroes were soldiers and policemen and doctors and firemen. I always loved that he would take the time to point that out. And so it's that's where I kind of that kind of includes everything we were talking about the current state of comics and how these characters are handled, and I don't see a point in telling stories about these kinds of larger than life figures and giving them all feet of clay and making decisions that you kind of hate them for, and things like that. Especially when it's not something that can be rectified or that they can, it's one thing for Spider-Man to make a mistake and to feel guilty about it and to try to redeem himself and everything. But come on, give him a path to redemption. The kind of stories that they were doing with the Illuminati and everything, it's like, come on, guys. This is on the character forever.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's the kind of thing that and of course, I also recognize that, we could do a reboot and start all over again. So, there's that.
Yeah.
There is no such thing as forever in comic.
Very true, very true. Yeah, I think we have maybe just one last question, I think, and then I guess because we've kept you on here for about 2 hours now.
No, it's my pleasure. Don't worry about it, pal. I always expected to. I'm not somebody that needs you to get off after an hour because I've got 27 other things to do at 9 o'clock at night. Like I said, I'm a middle-aged white guy. I'm happy to talk comics if you want.
Awesome. No, we appreciate it. We love it. I guess the question that I had too is like you mentioned you always wanted to do Captain America and stuff like that. And
sure.
Is there any other characters that you just would really like to be able to work on that you haven't had a chance to work on yet?
Sure. I mean, Cap's a big one. Fantastic Four. I've always loved the Fantastic Four characters. The idea that Marvel now exists without a monthly copy of Fantastic Four coming out, that is absolutely no sense.
That is absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
At some point before we're done here, you're going to have to say for me, whoa, hey, everything's fine. Oh, Lord. But anyway, there's that. I used to
I'll do that for sure.
Any character created before 1972, I would probably like to work on. I personally don't like the redesigns on the Vision. But the original Vision design I thought was so cool, and I would have loved to. I never got to do the Vision looking like the Vision. I mean, he came back into the Avengers for a while there, but he had a different look, and I drew the different look dutifully, and and all that kind of jazz. But I loved the Vision. I would have loved to have done a run on the Avengers. A-Next was as close as I ever got to a run on the Avengers. Iron Man's a terrific character, but I think, I'm not into detailed tech and everything, so the way the character is handled now, I like it. I think it's terrific, and it reflects the films, but I don't think I would be right for something like that. That's not something I really enjoy. The classic Iron Man, we actually did a couple issues of Spider-Girl, where Tony Stark went back into action, and not surprisingly, he pulled his old armor out of mothballs and just wore the 60s armor.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's cool.
And looked suspiciously like George Tuska was drawing him. It's weird how that happened on comic books sometimes. But I mean, there's a bunch of characters I never got to. Because I got to work on Spider-Man. We got to do a bunch of guest stars. Certainly on Thor, Captain America guest starred quite often, and would show up, and I would get to do. I've gotten to do my share of Cap. I've done 2 fill-in issues of Captain America, and covers and backup stories. DeFalco and I did one. It was a lot of fun. We retold the story from that issue of Sergeant Fury where he meets Captain America. We retold it it was like a 10-page backup in an anniversary issue of Captain America, where we told the same story from Cap and Bucky's point of view.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And it was fun, because, I was channeling Kirby and Ayers, and got to draw, the classic characters, got to draw Sergeant Fury and Dum Dum and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that was one of the pieces of casting. I've always just had a fondness for the character of Dum Dum. And he was so perfectly cast in Captain America: The First Avenger. I thought they did a terrific job casting him, and he got to show up on Agent Carter.
Agent Carter, yeah.
So I enjoyed. I like that actor a lot too.
Yeah, I did too. I would have liked to have seen more of that actually on Agent Carter. I think that would have been awesome.
He was. I mean, that was. Wow. I mean, that episode they did where she teamed up with the Howlers, and they were even handling. They even named a couple. They even name checked a couple other characters from Sergeant Fury book and everything. It was one of my favorite episodes of the series, because I enjoyed those characters so much.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I've just, like I said, there certainly were books that I would have liked to have worked on. There were characters I would have liked to have handled, but I can't complain about the stuff I did get to do, because when you get to be on a book like Thor for 7 years, and he is involved in the Avengers, and you can use Avengers Mansion, and you have the entire Marvel Universe as a sandbox to play in. I mean, I always wanted to do Annihilus, and we weren't on Fantastic Four, but we did a story where Asgard, when it was floating without the bridge, it went into the negative zone, and that was so I could do Annihilus.
That's awesome.
wow.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
That kind of thing. And I pitched it to DeFalco, and he went, "Yeah, we can do that. That sounds fun." So on Spider-Man, I've always been a huge Spider-Man fan from the time I was a kid. And when I got on the book, I wouldn't have minded doing all the classic villains, but Tom set policy, and he said, "Ron, what I'd like to do is I'd like to spend the first couple of years," which ended up being our entire run. We were only on for like 2.5 years before we got fired. He said, "I'd like to spend that creating new characters." And that's what we did. We created the Puma and Black Fox and Silver Sable and on and on and on. And did the mysteries with the Rose and
Hobgoblin.
And everything. And it was great fun. But, when we ended up doing some annuals later on, and we were looking because we were supposed to do like a flashback story for an annual, and we're kicking around ideas of what to do, and I said, well, here's one that's never actually been talked about, is how about if we did a story about the exact moment that Captain Stacy figured out that Pete was Spider-Man.
Oh.
It was back in '96. And it was the time I got inked by John Romita Sr. It was half of an annual that the other half was, I think, Fabian Nicieza and Steve Lytle, I think, doing a black costume story. But what we did, we set ours back during the Lee Romita stuff. And, that part of it, of Captain, that moment where Captain Stacy figures it out, because somehow it had never come out that Joe Robertson knew. Okay? Mm-hmm. Between you, me, and the lamppost, my attitude is Joe Robertson has always known. That he and Captain Stacy probably figured it out around the same time.
Exactly.
They were discussing it all the time. But since it had not been revealed in any way that Joe Robertson knew, we were just going to do a story where it was more of a personal thing that Captain Stacy figured it out. Whether or not he shared it with Joe, that's another story. That kind of thing. But the period of time we were placing it gave me the option, and Tom said, are there any characters that you've been wanting to draw that you never got a chance to draw in Spider-Man, because we were just creating new characters, and I immediately went, Kraven the Hunter.
Nice.
So we put Kraven in that story. Tom was very accommodating because it worked out, because Kraven had dealings with Norman Osborn around that time, and we just had, it all came together into I thought, a nice little story that what was weird about it was we had to do it with a framing sequence with Ben Reilly, because Ben Reilly was currently Spider-Man. It was in his Spider-Man costume, but fortunately Ben Reilly has all the same memories that Peter Parker has, so we were able to do the flashback. It was just we had to use Ben in the framing sequence, but and that was fun too, because I always liked that costume. That's why we ended up using it with Spider-Girl and stuff. I thought it was a really cool design. I thought it worked really well with the female figure. But
definitely.
Anyway, I forget what the question was, but yes, there are plenty of characters that I don't get to do. And when we did a Web Spinners 2-parter, Tom said, "Any other characters you'd like to do?" I said, "If it's all the same to you, I'd really like to do Dr. Octopus." We never got a chance to do Dr. Octopus. So,
nice.
We did him along with the team we had put together of the Sinister Syndicate, with the Beetle and Hydro Man and the Rhino and all that kind of stuff. And I've been really, really fortunate working with DeFalco and just being in the trenches with Marvel 616. I've had a chance to do a lot of really cool stuff that I look back on fondly. No complaints.
Awesome. Well, before we stop recording here, I just wanted to give you a chance to plug anything else. I know you were talking about the Sid Comics, and if you wanted to give out any URL or anything to where they can get that from Comixology, you said.
Yeah, it's on, the Sid Comics titles are available on Comixology, but I'll tell you what, the best place to go is the Sid Comics Facebook page. And it's SITCOMICS, one word, And he's on Facebook, and he posts updates on the production of the books, and there's connections there to other websites, and probably find a link to Comixology and everything. But that'll give you some background on the characters and everything. And please indulge yourself and be prepared, because there is going to be a hard copy rollout coming next year, and I'm really looking forward to it. I hope we have a success on our hands. God knows it's difficult to break into the comics market. I don't know exactly what all he has planned marketing-wise, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And the fact that the industry has managed to get some fresh eyes on some of the material lately with some of what they've been doing, hopefully we can kind of lean into that and entertain a new group of fans. So it would be very gratifying if this thing could catch on. But you guys now, you have to go to Comixology or mail order from him a hard copy or something, and you need to read the stuff, because the next time we talk,
absolutely, yeah.
If we ever talk again, or I see you at a show, if you haven't read Blue Baron, then I didn't give you a copy at the Pittsburgh show.
I don't think we did. No.
Oh, I suck, because
that's all right. Yeah.
Yeah, I was handing them out. If a couple of people offered to buy them, but if they showed any interest at all, if they weren't going to buy it, I was happy to give it to them, because it was a box that I just bought from him for promotional copies and stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah, I got a couple prints off you, and Chris got a drawing, an original from you.
Yeah.
Well, what?
Well, my son really wanted the Flash. I was all ready to get a Spider-Man from him.
Yeah, I remember that. Sure.
Yeah.
It was a side shot of the Flash.
Yes. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's framed and all.
I remember that interaction, because you were going to get him a Spider-Man, but
my son loves speedsters.
Flash, kids are honest with you. That's how that.
That's how. Yeah.
Did you see it on the? I guess it was printed on. It was a little brief video. I think it might have been on Instagram or something like that, of the new Spider-Man, Holland, going to a hospital, and he goes in full Spider-Man costume.
Oh, get out. That's awesome.
This kid, and he pulls off his mask, and he's talking to the kid, and the kid's wearing a Batman t-shirt. I said, "So you like Batman?" And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Do you like Batman better than Spider-Man?" And the kid goes, "Yeah." Why do you like Batman better than Spider-Man? And the kid just looks at it for a second and goes, "Poop." So there you go.
That's it. That's awesome.
I'm not saying my interaction with you guys was anything like that.
Good. Because we'd love to have you back on when the comic comes out in hard copy form.
Oh, that'd be terrific.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to. I really don't do a lot of shows these days. I don't enjoy traveling as much and everything. But when these books finally roll out, I am planning on taking every offer I can get to do a show to promote and to make sure that we get them in front of people's eyes. Darren's already been doing quite a few shows in his area. He's out in California, and he's been doing a lot of shows to just burn through the shoe leather and shake some hands and let people know it's coming and all that kind of stuff, But yeah, please check out the Facebook page and look back at the photos. I mean, he runs pages as they're being developed and everything, and see if there's anything in there that strikes your fancy. And if you like it, tell everybody about it. And if you don't, keep your mouth shut. Anyway, it's been a pleasure, guys. Are we wrapping up then?
Yeah, let me stop recording, and if you won't mind staying on, we'll talk a little bit off the record.
Okay,
if that's okay. All right. This is Rick back again. That's the end of our podcast. I hope you enjoyed our discussion with Ron Frenz as much as we did. And one of the things that we had talked about after we're done with the podcast is having him back on the podcast at a later date. So stay tuned for that as well. In the meantime, you can find us at allofmyissues.com, at allofmyissues on Twitter. You can find us on Instagram. If you want to email us for any questions or any topics for a podcast in the future, you can email us at allofmyissues@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.